"Don't look back," the sheriff warned, his voice low, almost pleading. But the widow turned around anyway. The wind had teeth that morning, cutting through the narrow main street of Red Hollow like it meant to carve names into bone. Dust rolled in slow spirals around the hitching posts. A church bell clanged once, then fell silent, as if even God had decided to hold his breath. Mary Caldwell stood at the edge of town with a black shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She had worn that shawl every day since the night her husband was buried on the hill beyond the cottonwoods. 3 years had passed, yet the weight of it still pressed into her spine like grief never learned how to leave. Behind her, Sheriff Thomas Hale sat tall on his horse, reins clenched, jaw set hard. He had known Mary since before the lines etched her face, since she was a laughing girl who believed the world was kind. Now she was a widow with eyes to steady for someone who had lost so much. "If you turn around," Hale said, "quieter now, you won't be the same woman by sundown." Mary didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the small leather pouch at her waist, the last thing her husband left her. Inside was a folded paper and a brass key, both worn smooth from years of wondering. Red Hollow was a town built on silence. Men here didn't speak of the past. They buried it in dry earth and rode on. Mary had tried to do the same, but silence had cost her sleep, faith, and nearly her soul. She took one step back toward Town Hale, exhaled sharply. "Mary, some doors stay closed for a reason." She turned fully now, facing the street she'd sworn never to walk again. "So do graves," she said softly. "And they still call to the living." 3 years earlier, her husband Eli Caldwell had ridden out as a deputy under Hale's badge. He never rode back. They said it was an ambush. Outlaws, bad luck. That was the story. But stories in Red Hollow have a way of changing shape when you stared at them long enough. Mary began walking. Each step echoed like a gunshot in her chest. Storefronts passed her by, the dry goods shop with its faded sign, the barber pole creaking in the wind, the saloon whose piano keys still carried ghosts of laughter. Faces appeared in windows, then vanished. Folks recognized her. A widow walking back into town always meant trouble or truth. She felt it then, that sensation she hadn't felt since Eli kissed her goodbye at dawn, the feeling that something terrible and important was about to happen. At the saloon door, she stopped. The sign above it read "The Last Chance," paint peeling like old scabs. Mary rested her hand on the doorframe. Her reflection stared back at her through the glass, older, thinner, but unbroken. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and half-spoken scenes. Men fell silent when she entered. Cards stopped mid-shuffle. A whiskey glass rose inches from a mouth. Mary walked straight to the bar. "Morning," said the bartender, forcing politeness. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm not here for a drink," she replied. "I'm here for answers." No one laughed. No one moved. She reached into her pouch and placed the brass key on the counter. It rang out sharper than a gun cocking. "This key belonged to my husband," she said. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I should find out what it opens." Murmurs rippled through the room. At the far table sat a man with a scarred cheek and eyes like wet stone. Jonah Pike, former deputy, discharged 2 weeks before Eli died. Mary had seen him at the funeral. He hadn't met her eyes then. He didn't now. "What does that key open?" Jonah muttered. Mary turned to him slowly. "That's what I came to ask you." The room tightened. Even the piano player stopped breathing. Before Jonah could answer, the saloon doors burst open. Sheriff Hale stepped inside, his badge catching the light. His gaze locked onto Mary, fear, regret, and something darker flickering across his face. "I told you not to look back," he said. Mary met his eyes, her voice steady but shaking underneath. "You told me to forget. I buried my husband instead." She picked up the key. "And I'm done burying the truth." Hale's hand drifted toward his gun, not to draw, but out of old habit. "Mary, there are men in this town who daren't want what's buried to be found." She nodded. "Then they shouldn't have killed my husband." A silence fell so heavy it pressed men into their chairs. Outside, thunder rolled over the plains, though the sky was clear. Jonah Pike stood up. "There's a place," he said hoarsely. "Old freight office by the rail spur. Locked for years." Mary felt her heart stumble. The freight office, Eli used to patrol there. She turned toward the door. Sheriff Hale took one step forward. "If you go there," he said, voice breaking, "you won't just change your life." Mary paused, her hand on the door. She didn't turn back this time. "You'll change the whole town." And as she stepped into the sunlight, Mary Caldwell had no idea how much blood, truth, and redemption waited behind that locked door. In the quiet town of Harmony Creek, life moved at a gentle pace. But for Mary, that gentle pace shattered the day she lost her husband, John. The official story was a tragic accident, a heart attack while hiking. But a small, nagging doubt took root in Mary's heart, a doubt that would soon grow into a terrifying certainty. John was a meticulous man, a former journalist who left nothing to chance. He wouldn't have gone hiking alone without his emergency gear. Something was wrong. Days turned into weeks, and Mary's grief was a heavy cloak. While sorting through John's old office, a space filled with memories and the scent of old paper, she found it. Tucked away in a false-bottomed drawer was a small black notebook. His handwriting, usually so neat, was rushed, almost frantic. The pages were filled with cryptic notes, shipping manifests, names of local council members, and a series of dates that made her blood run cold. The dates corresponded to late-night deliveries at the old, abandoned sawmill just outside of town. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Mary staked out the sawmill. Huddled in her car under the cloak of darkness, she watched as a large, unmarked truck rumbled up the dirt road. Figures emerged from the shadows, familiar faces from town hall people she'd known her whole life. Councilman Miller, Mr. Henderson from the zoning board, even Sheriff Brody. They weren't unloading lumber. They were unloading crates, long and rectangular, stamped with foreign markings, crates that looked suspiciously like they contained weapons. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. John hadn't stumbled upon a secret. He had been investigating one gun running, right here in Harmony Creek, orchestrated by the very people elected to protect it. Her husband hadn't died of a heart attack. He had been silenced. A cold fury replaced her grief. They had taken her husband, her future, and they thought they had gotten away with it. They were wrong. Mary knew she couldn't go to the police. Sheriff Brody was one of them. She was alone. But John had left her more than just a notebook. He had left her his courage. She began her own investigation, a ghost in the machine they had built. She used a burner phone to document their movements, capturing grainy photos of their late-night meetings. She cross-referenced the names in John's notebook with public records, uncovering a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The town council wasn't just corrupt. They were part of a much larger, more dangerous network. her biggest break came from an unlikely source. A disgruntled clerk at the town hall, tired of being overlooked and underpaid, had noticed discrepancies in the town's budget for years. He'd been too afraid to speak up, but when Mary approached him with what she knew, his fear was eclipsed by a desire for justice. Together, they found the paper trail, forged permits, laundered money disguised as town improvement projects. The gun-running operation was being funded by the town's own taxpayers. Armed with irrefutable evidence photos, financial records, and the clerk's testimony, Mary knew it was time. But she couldn't just hand it over to the authorities. The corruption ran too deep. She had to expose them to the one power they couldn't control, the public. She contacted a trusted journalist friend of John's from a major city newspaper. Someone far removed from Harmony Creek's sphere of influence. The next town council meeting was packed. The council members sat smugly on their dais, ready to discuss mundane zoning laws. They had no idea their world was about to implode. As Councilman Miller droned on about a new park bench initiative, the doors to the hall swung open. In walked Mary, flanked by the city journalist and a camera crew. A hush fell over the room. "Councilman Miller," Mary's voice rang out, clear and steady. "Before we discuss park benches, perhaps we could discuss the contents of these." She held up copies of the shipping manifests. "Or maybe these photos from the old sawmill. I'm sure the good people of Harmony Creek would be very interested to know how their tax dollars are really being spent." Panic erupted. Miller's face went pale. Sheriff Brody's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but he froze as cameras flashed, broadcasting his every move live. The carefully constructed facade of Harmony Creek crumbled in an instant. The story exploded, becoming a national headline. Federal agents descended on the small town, and the corrupt council members, who once held all the power, were led away in handcuffs. Standing in the town square weeks later, Mary looked at the for sale signs on the houses of the disgraced council members. The town was healing, but the scars would remain. She hadn't sought vengeance, but justice. In a world where it seemed easier to look away, she had chosen to look closer. She had honored her husband's memory not by mourning him, but by finishing his work. Mary had discovered that true strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the courage to act in spite of it. And in the quiet that followed the storm, she finally found her peace. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you were moved by Mary's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We'll see you in the next video. The rifle shot echoed through the freight office like a final warning from God himself. Councilman Brewer flinched, his smile collapsing into something thin and afraid. Dust drifted from the ceiling. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then another shot rang out closer, this time followed by a familiar voice, loud and unwavering. "Drop your weapons," Sheriff Hale shouted, "or the next one won't miss." Brewer turned toward the cellar door, rage flashing across his face. "You stupid old fool," he hissed. "This town survives because of men like us." Hale stepped into view at the top of the stairs, bleeding from a cut along his temple, but standing tall, rifle steady in his hands. His badge caught the light like it had finally remembered what it was meant to be. "No," Hale said. "It survives in spite of you." Gunfire erupted all at once. Mary pressed herself against the wall as splinters flew, and smoke filled the cellar. Jonah moved instinctively, shoving a crate over, shielding her with his own body. The noise was deafening, shouts, shots, boots, scrambling in panic. Then, suddenly, silence. Mary opened her eyes. Brewer lay sprawled on the cellar floor, his gun skittered away, blood darkening his coat. Two other men fled up the stairs, fear finally outweighing greed. Hale descended slowly, breathing hard, his rifle lowered. "It's over," he said quietly. Mary's legs nearly gave out. She clutched the ledger to her chest, tears finally breaking free, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like rain after a drought. Jonah looked at Hale. "You gonna finish what Eli started?" Hale nodded. "Circuit judge arrives tomorrow. I already sent word before they came for us. This time, I won't look away." The sun was setting when they emerged from the freight office. A crowd had gathered, men, women, children, faces tight with fear and questions. Mary stepped forward, the ledger in her hands, her black shawl fluttering in the evening wind. She climbed onto a crate and held the book high. "My husband died because he believed this town could be better," she said, her voice carrying farther than she expected. "He believed truth was worth more than comfort. Tonight, you decide whether he died for nothing." No one spoke. Then a woman stepped forward. Then another. A rancher removed his hat. A boy took his mother's hand. One by one, the silence broke not with cheers, but with resolve. Justice in Red Hollow wouldn't be clean, but it would be real. Weeks later, snow dusted the hills beyond town. 2 men sat in chains in the courthouse. Others had fled. The gun-running routes were exposed. Red Hollow's name would be whispered for years, not as a warning, but as a lesson. Mary stood at Eli's grave at dawn, the ledger now sealed and sent away. Sheriff Hale stood beside her, hat in hand. "I failed him," he said, "but I won't fail this town again." Mary nodded. "Make it mean something." Hale left her there, alone with the quiet and the frost. She knelt and brushed snow from the headstone. "You were right," she whispered. "Fear doesn't finish the job. Silence does." The wind stirred the grass, gentle now. Spring came slowly. Mary sold the cabin on the hill and reopened the old schoolhouse near the creek. Children filled it with noise and laughter, and for the first time in years, the sound didn't hurt. One afternoon, Jonah Pike stopped by. Cleaner now, sober. Trying. "I'm heading east," he said. "Figured I'd say goodbye." Mary smiled softly. Eli would have liked that. Jonah hesitated, then placed his hat over his heart. "He already saved me twice." As Jonah rode away, Mary turned back to the schoolhouse, to the children waiting inside. Red Hollow would never forget her husband's name, and neither would she, but grief no longer owned her. That evening, Mary walked through town as the sun bled gold across the street. The saloon piano played softly. The church bell rang not in warning, but in welcome. She reached the edge of town and stopped. Once, she had been told not to look back. This time, she did. And the town she saw was different. Not perfect, not innocent, but honest, alive. Mary Caldwell turned forward again and walked on, carrying with her the quiet truth that one brave choice, made by a widow who refused to stay silent, had changed everything. Some towns are saved by guns. Others are saved by courage. And sometimes, all it takes is a woman who finally decides to turn around